In this video, I'll show you how to use Google Sheets to make a histogram for a quantitative variable. First, we need to have some data into Google Sheets. I'm using data from a previous example, but you can also type in data with your keyboard. When you want to make a histogram, you can highlight your data first. So I'm clicking and dragging over the variable, how many cars have you owned in your lifetime? And then I'll go up to the menu and click Insert, and then halfway down to Chart. So Google Sheets will make a chart for you right away, but it's not necessarily the right chart. So we need to tell it what chart to make because we made a pie chart, which is not proper for quantitative data. So over in the chart editor, under the Setup tab, we're going to choose the chart type that is all the way down at the bottom, and it's under the other graphs, and on mine it shows it's the middle one on the top row called histogram chart. So if you hover over these little graphs, it'll bring up a little pop-up and tell you what type of chart it is. We want the histogram chart. We click on that and we're pretty much done, except for it is not very pretty. We need to make this a lot prettier and a little bit more correct. So things to look at on a histogram are, does the title describe what we're seeing in the graph? And then is the y-axis variable a correct label? And then how about an x-axis label? And then what about these bin widths? So the first thing I notice is that there is no x-axis label. So I'm going to go over to the chart editor that's still open because I've clicked on my chart. If it disappears, just double click on your chart again. Click on the customize, and then one of the items here on the list is chart and axis titles. So I want to click on the horizontal axis title, and this data set was how many cars you had owned in your lifetime. So I'm going to label this axis number of cars. And then for my vertical axis, your y-axis, so I clicked on that, and it says a very long description, but I'm just going to write frequency. Usually the y-axis can be something simple like frequency, count, or maybe relative frequency or percent. You can change that along the horizontal axis further down in the menu here. And then I want to change the title. This is what I want to give really descriptive and not just this question here. So I'm going to delete the title, and we're going to say responses from students about the number of cars they have owned in their lifetime. If it's appropriate, you might want to make a subtitle if you find that the title's kind of long. That one might be a little bit too long, but it is pretty descriptive here. So you don't have to make the other axes as descriptive. And let's fix that. Responses from, there we go. All right, so I have my titles and axes, or title and axes correctly made. Now I would like to fix the bin widths here. So the bin widths are nice to have, like expected numbers. Bin widths of 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, I don't know, maybe 50, 100, depending on, or 1,000, 10,000, depending on your data set. So I know that the range of my data set goes from 0 to 9, so that's pretty small actually. And with my data set that's about, 20 data points, histogram might be a little overkill because the data set is pretty small. But I can play around with these bin widths and then see what the data are trying to tell me. So I will go to the Customize tab and then down to Histogram, and under this drop-down window, bucket size, that's actually the width of the bar of the histogram. They call it a bucket, you can call it a bin, it's the bar, it's kind of how wide these bars are. So right now it's set at auto, but I could choose 1, and then that means that the bars will go from 0 to almost 1, and then 1 to almost 2. You can also hover on a bar, and nope, I lied. You can't hover on a bar, it's not going to show you any other information. But what you can do is you can kind of test out to see how the data were graphed by choosing a bar and then going back to your data set and counting. which is, fine for a small data set, but when it gets to be a large data set, you want to know how this works ahead of time. So did we have two groups or two students who said that they'd own 9 cars in their lifetime? There's one student, two students. Yes. Okay, so it looks like the bar goes from 9 to almost 9.5. That should technically be leveled at 10, so you have equal bin widths. Just FYI. Google did it wrong. So if we want to change the bin width so that it looks a little different, maybe a bin width of 1 is too much information, and we would rather have it summarized a little bit more. So we can go to 2. We can get a feel for what that looks like. Here's a bin width of 5. Here's a bin width of 10. You can see how useful the bucket size or bin width can be at describing this data set. So I think a bin width of 1 is pretty appropriate for this data set, maybe even 2. I do kind of like seeing the number of people who haven't owned any cars though, so I kind of like that. Bin width of 1. So that is how we use Google Sheets to make a histogram for a set of data.